Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I hope you're doing remarkably well. And go and get yourself a fabulous, fabulous drink because I've got a lovely horror story for you tonight. So before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's get started with tonight's story. Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners. Growing up, I grew up in a foster home with a younger brother, Antonio. We weren't related by blood, as Antonio had Navajo roots, which were clearly seen in his outer appearance. He had nut brown skin, dark hair, dark eyes, and a heart on him of pure gold. I loved him a lot. He was my best friend, and as far as I was concerned, he was my blood brother in every single regard. I'm not sure how he ended up becoming fostered, as the story regarding his birth was rather blurry and vague. But I gather he was found on the doorstep of the convent in a basket with a note saying, "He's half Navajo. Please take care of him. I've named him Antonio. Tell him I love him." I, on the other hand, had been born in New York to a troubled 16-year-old girl dealing with substance abuse who had handed me over to the nuns at the convent as she couldn't cope with raising me herself. I had been informed that it had almost been a wrestling match to hand me over to the nuns, but after they had consoled her, talked to her at great length, she had decided that handing me over to them was the best thing she could do. On hearing the story from my foster mother, I had empathy with my 16-year-old mother, whom I'd never met. When I was 18 years old, I commiserated with her, as there is no way I could cope with raising a kid so young myself. My foster mother, Peggy Lou, told me that the nuns had said to my 16-year-old mother, "You can't look after yourself. How can you look after this kid? Love sometimes means great personal sacrifice. You need to think of your child's future." She had looked up at the nuns through eyes brimming with tears and said, "You're right. I can't look after him. I'm too young. I'm all over the place. Please promise me you won't change his name. You must call him Sebastian." To which the nuns had agreed. Growing up, my name was shortened to Seb. As far as I was concerned, Sebastian was a mouthful. My foster parents weren't exactly wealthy people. I think they appreciated that the state gave them money for our charge. But that was not the reason they were raising us. They loved children, and my mother couldn't have any of her own. She described herself to me as barren, like Hannah in the Bible. But she was a Hannah whose voice God had failed to hear. I'm not exactly sure why she couldn't have children, but there are some things you don't ask a woman, even if she is your foster mother. I figured if she wanted to tell me why she was barren, she would confide in me when she chose, but she never did. The great thing about the convent was that they did a thorough check-up on all the homes where the orphan children would be fostered, or better still adopted. The nuns wanted to assure themselves that we would be brought up in a secure, safe, very loving environment. I gathered that my two foster parents went through grueling, extensive interviews with the Mother Superior, whom spontaneously made impromptu visits over the years to our home, never informing us when she was popping over for a visit. Sometimes another nun would come in the Mother Superior's place. She would take us always to one side and interview us about our home life with questions like, "Do you like your mummy, Seb? And when your mummy gets cross, does she ever hit you?" The Mother Superior and the nuns at the convent were so thorough in checking that we were having happy lives, that we were safe and secure. And that's a hell of a lot better than social services, in my opinion, because they left no stone unturned. In a heartbeat, they would have whisked me and my brother away from my parents' home if there was the slightest inkling of abuse in the air. My foster mum told me that the nuns at the convent were not happy about her not being married to my foster father. But they understand when my mother explained she didn't believe in a piece of paper or in the institution of marriage itself, as the nun was rather concerned that my parents weren't married. My mother explained that she felt that you didn't need to be married to be committed as a parent or a wife. I think the Mother Superior realised my foster mother was troubled by the subject of marriage, as her own mother had been married over 5 times, and my foster mother thought marriage was actually jinxed. I think the Mother Superior liked my mother so very much that she overlooked these kind of issues that my mother had with paperwork. My mother was very afraid that the nuns would think that she and my father weren't wealthy enough to foster us, but nothing could have been further from the truth. My mother was to discover that a nun is not easily put off by a lack of money, as they have to take a vow of poverty themselves. The Mother Superior sagaciously told my mother that as long as you have a roof over your kids' heads, enough money to provide for food, medicine, clothes and schooling, then you're absolutely fine. My mother was informed that if she ran out of money for our quintessential needs, to contact them at once, as their charitable fund would help cover costs for us. But it's not about the money, it's about love. That's all that matters, she was told. I don't really have any memories of the convent, as I was very young when my foster mother brought me home, although I do recollect the Mother Superior saying, "Seth, this is your new foster mummy." I didn't know what foster meant, and I never cared to ask. I do remember the Mother Superior coming to visit us from time to time, asking us the strangest questions. She would close the bedroom door behind me and give me my present, that I would tear open so excitedly, as if all my Christmases had come at once, and as if the Mother Superior herself was some kind of magical fairy godmother, answering the wishes of a young boy. She always brought us the most amazing presents. I remember once being given a train set from the Mother Superior, and another time me and my brother were both given fabulous bicycles. I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. "So tell me, Seth," she would say, "are you happy in this house with your mummy and daddy? Are they nice to you? Do they ever fight? Do they drink alcohol? Do they ever get cross with you?" I would show her pictures I drew of my family, with a big smiley sun shining down on our home. The Mother Superior would leave, feeling fully satisfied that we were happy children, and she wasn't wrong. We absolutely were. Suffice to say, even though my mother and dad never got married, nor did they legally adopt us, but let's just say they'll always be mum and dad to us. By all accounts, most people who met them assumed they were naturally married, and we were their birth children. Me and my brother never corrected them. If they thought it was strange that my brother looked so different to me, they never asked any awkward questions, as oddities aren't altogether uncommon in families. I do count my blessings that I was raised in such a loving environment. I know I was very blessed. Ostensibly, from a young age, my brother Antonio would seem to know things sometimes before they actually happened. He'd say, "The Mother Superior's visiting us today," and sure enough, he'd be right about her fortuitous visit. He even told my mother that she was going to fall on the patio outside and break her wrist. "Maybe if you're careful, it won't happen to you," he told her. My mother had said to him affectionately, "What are you like, Antonio? You do dream up some crazy stuff, don't you?" But as sure as eggs is eggs, my mother slipped down the patio steps one icy winter morning and reached down to support herself in the fall. Her wrist broke and just snapped. I remember me and Antonio screamed when she came into the house with her hand virtually dangling off her wrist. It was the most grotesque sight we'd ever seen. I remember she was in agonizing pain and had an operation to pin her wrist together. But what befuddled me the most was how could my brother Antonio have known she would break her wrist like this? My mother decided that Antonio's Navajo roots gave him the gift of a second sight. Whether this was true or not, I certainly don't know. But my brother claimed to be visited by an eagle in his dreams regularly, and the eagle would tell him things that came true, which I thought was incredibly special. I envied him for having a totem animal visiting him in his dreams. For most of my dreams I just never remembered, and when I did they were nonsensical and irrational. Such a bummer. Growing up, my parents struggled financially, but we were surrounded by a plethora of love that we couldn't fault. My mother was the most nurturing spirit. She would read to us every night, while my father was a diligently hard-working character who sometimes worked 3 jobs to provide for us, so he wanted for nothing. We had a great life. We lived in a small rural American town in Idaho called Stanley. It's referred to as the crown jewel of mountain towns, with its prepossessing dramatic alpine scenery, and surrounded by very imposing snow-capped mountains. Our house was a long, symmetrical white building that had been sectioned off into several other homes, so the front of the house boasted 5 front doors, each door belonging to a different semi-detached house. We lived at number 53. By all accounts, it was rather poky and small, but it suited our needs. There was a paper-thin dividing wall between our home and the next-door neighbours on either side of us, so uncomfortably close, in fact, that we pretty much knew the intimate details of their lives. The neighbours on our right-hand side were always screaming and shouting obscenities at each other. We picked up that it was the woman that goaded our husband with her cutting words. She was so nasty to him. So me and my brother learnt early on in life that women can be very abusive in relationships. It's not just men. I'd seen the young lady in question before on numerous occasions. She looked like butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. She was so pretty, so slight, with long blonde hair that tousled on her shoulders in pretty waves. It seemed hard to fathom that a seemingly demure young lady, who had an angelic face, could be so hostile, cruel, vindictive, under her deceptively attractive veneer. It rather reminds me of an ornate wallpaper covering up the ugliest wall, to hide up all its faults, its underlying pits and cracks. When my mother used to tell me never to judge a book by its cover, I now knew what she meant. One day me and my brother watched our neighbour leaving her house. We were on our bicycles, staring at her curiously. She turned and spat some spittle on the ground, glaring at us with wide blue eyes, and piped maliciously, "What are you staring at, you gormless little brats? Get the hell out of my way!" From that moment on, I called her the Ice Queen, although I found out her name was Prissy, which I think is short for Priscilla, although I can't be sure. My brother called her Prickly Prissy, which I thought was most apt. When our neighbours were having an explosive spat that caused the walls to literally shake and wobble under the vibration of Prissy's high-pitched screams, we would pin our ears inquisitively to the wall and eavesdrop on these highly entertaining but cruel altercations. I began to feel very sorry for Priscilla's husband Larry. I couldn't fathom why he did not up and leave, for his own self-respect, but he never did. Instead, he put up with her insane abuse and became her quintessential punching bag. I was absolutely appalled by the viciousness of the woman's words. In truth, they were so vile, I cannot actually repeat them on paper. It would make me physically squirm and soil this page with their odorous foulness. Let's just say her words often related to the human anatomy and were fierce, cutting, and highly unsavoury. Occasionally, Prissy's bullied husband would march out of the house, screaming belligerently at his wife, "I'm getting out of here, you bloody bitch! I wish to God I'd never married you." I'd watch him thunder furiously towards his car, his head shaking. He'd bounce onto the front seat, slam the door behind him with a loud bang, press the accelerator down so hard that the rubber tires would actually shriek under the burden of his wrath. He would drive away at a breakneck speed, but I didn't blame him. Then, dejected and forsaken, he would finally return home late at night, staggering up the driveway in an inebriated, intoxicated state, slurring on his words, unable to walk steadily in a straight line. I could always hear the wife hurling and spitting abuse at him when he did return home. "You're such a bloody drunken loser," she'd shout. One day he was so plastered, his legs crumbled beneath him. He passed out outside his front door, in a huge mangled heap, like a large sack of dirty washing. My brother alerted my mother to the problem, as we were woken up to our neighbour crashing around like an elephant in a china shop. My parents brought the drunk-blooded man into our house to sleep on our couch. If he'd been left out there in those freezing conditions, he could have succumbed to hypothermia, but I don't think his hard toffee-nosed wife would have given a toss. I think the only thing that she loved was herself. My mother covered our neighbour with blankets, and the next morning I remember saying to him, "Sir, you don't have to stay with your wife, you know. She's really horrible to you." He had looked at me bemused and said, "You're right, son. I don't have to stay with her, do I? God knows why I put up with her. I'm my own worst enemy, and my wife's favourite punching bag." I would ponder this over many years, and wonder why some people stayed in such unhappy relationships. My mother told our neighbour Larry that if he needed to stay over at our house when his wife kicked him out, he was more than welcome. He soon became a regular fixture and fitting on our couch in our living room. I think he preferred to stay over with us than face the wrath of his condescending, foul-mouthed, capricious wife. Sometimes I'd open our door for him and lead him to our sofa. He was a gentle, kind character, an unassuming soul, who didn't deserve the unkind abuse he was subjected to. I knew he medicated the pain of his marriage with alcohol. It would have been so much easier if he'd just walked away, and I wish he had. The odious woman on the surface looked so benign, but underneath the door she was anything but, rather like a beautiful tree frog that is toxically poisonous. Over the years, my mother succeeded in making a cheerful, mellow home for us. She bought homely furniture from second-hand shops, thrift stores, garage sales, and flea markets, and although it was an eclectic mix of mismatches, it worked. Our house was small, cosy, snug, warm and comfy, and the spitting, cracking fire we had in the living room on cold winter nights was what dreams are made of. We would sit around the fire, roasting marshmallows. My father would tell us so many fabulous stories. He was an amazing storyteller, and we would much prefer listening to one of his stories than watching the box any day of the week. My brother and I would make money by doing odd jobs for people around town. We didn't want to ask my dad for money, as he worked his butt off for us in the first place and would easily and selflessly have given us the shirt off his back if I'd even asked him for it. He was the kindest, most gentle man I have ever known. He was tall and big, reminding me of a lovable teddy bear. He gave you the best, biggest, barest hugs. My brother and I over the years would engage in any job going and would paint yard fences, mow lawns, clean out people's fish tanks. There was no job too big or too small for us, and we had saved up a considerable amount of money, and we were going to put it towards buying our first car that we intended to share. One day I decided to take a job working for a fast food outlet that paid double if you worked night shifts. I was 18 years old at the time and could drive to work in my dad's car. My mother was not too keen on me taking the job over the late hours of the night, but I told her it would be absolutely fine. Professedly, I'd be the only one working on night duty, and there were very few customers at that ungodly time of the night. I could busy myself by watching Netflix on my cell or listening to stories. My mother reluctantly, obsequiously agreed when my father told her to stop mollycoddling me. "Seb wants a bit of independence, sweetheart. I know you mean well. You're a good woman. But he's a grown man, and if he wants to work night shift, let him, for goodness sake." "I still don't like our son being out there all night. You hear stories, horrible stories, don't you?" "For goodness sake, sweetheart, you've been watching far too many horror movies. Lots of people all over America work night shift, and they don't come to any harm. I'm sure our son will be just fine." "But some of them do come to harm," my mother had insisted. My brother Antonio also tried to put me off working at the drive-thru, claiming he sensed something untoward would happen at the place for me, and he kept getting visions of a big black creature. I didn't appreciate my brother's foreboding words, but they were far too vague to take seriously. He wasn't warning me that I'd break my wrist or something. He was just saying he sensed something off. Perhaps he was trying to scare me off the job, as he sensed my mother's discomposure, and he had her back. He was a kind lad like that. I had been working at the drive-thru for over 6 months, without anything inopportune ever happening. The night shifts were drudgingly quiet, sometimes so deathly still that all I could hear was my own breath, which could feel quite ominous at times. I was to find there was barely a soul around at this time of night, as who in their right mind wants to eat a burger at an insanely late hour of the night? Granted, you get a few people, but they are few and far between. The manager only kept the place open for franchise obligations and quotas to do with opening hours, I think. Let's just say he encouraged me to work the late shift, but if I'm being given double pay for doing absolutely nothing, I'm hardly going to look a gift horse in the mouth, am I? Every night the chef would efficiently cook over a dozen burgers that were neatly tucked away in their cardboard boxes on the steaming hot tray, looking like lonely, dishevelled, shrunken, large black mushrooms that had seen better days, and were as fresh as the lettuce that has been sitting in the refrigerator for days on end. I knew how to use the deep fryer when customers ordered chips, and frankly, they were the only things worth ordering at this late time of the night. On this particular evening, I think I only had served about 2 people,
I took their orders at the ordering booth and then served them their burgers at the hatch, as I was all on my own. I then went to sit down close to the booth to entertain myself with some YouTube videos. In a trice I hear the sound of screeching car tyres rolling down the driveway, so I expeditiously prepare myself for taking an order and walk over to the ordering hatch, but no one is there. I had definitely heard a car approaching. I knew I wasn't mistaken. So I curiously walk over to the dining area of the fast food chain, which is an eating area during the day for hungry customers, and spaciously composed of tables and chairs, like you would see in a regular fast food outlet like McDonald's or Burger King. The floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlook the car park, the interstate on one side, and a wood grove on the other. The outside lights of the fast food chain are on, and there's a flashing light with the words drive-through open. I audibly recoil as I see a truck parked precariously in the middle of the driveway at a haphazard diagonal, an atypical angle it seems, with its lights on and the driver's side door wide open. What the hell, I think? What is the driver doing parked in the middle of the customer parking bay with his door wide open like that? It occurs to me he must be in trouble. Perhaps he needs my help. My heart is thundering in my chest because something feels really off about this. But I can't sit back and do nothing, can I? If there's a man in his truck, he might be in need of help. I can't abandon him like this. Supposing he's having a heart attack and needs emergency help. It's at times like this that my job working alone on the night shift feels a lot less favourable to me. And right now, I'd rather be anywhere else in the world than right here. I glance at the clock. It registers 3 o'clock in the morning. I hurriedly grab the torch that I bring to work as a matter of routine. It is unnaturally nebulously quiet. There's an almost full moon, a scattering of silvery stars. But despite their generous luminescence, the uncongenial hostility of the twilight seems to be cloaking and surreptitiously veiling a cloying clandestine evil that is loitering beneath the dark shadows, hiding within its murky, bodeful depths. In a trice, a menacious sense of being watched with blazing, burning eyes that burn their firing embers into me causes my legs to crumble beneath me like a table that has lost its legs. Of course, I'm being silly, I tell myself. Hold it together, for goodness sake. Stop being such a wet blanket, I tell myself sternly. Hello, sir, I call out as I see a man's figure slumped against the seat. His eyes stare vacantly ahead of him. Hello, sir. Are you all right? I call, moving towards his driver's seat door, which is wide open, and peering inside at the motionless man, whom is unresponsive. I'm greeted to the strong scent of whiskey. The man's been drinking, I think. I guess he must have passed out. Hello, sir. Are you all right? Sir? Sir, are you all right? Sir? Then I recognise the face. It's our next-door neighbour, Larry Beckenridge, who often sleeps on our couch at home. He must have come to the fast food joint for a burger to satisfy an attack of the munchies. I know Mr. Beckenridge has a history of passing out when he's drunk. I shake his body furiously hard, but it slumps over, falling to the ground, and I realise to my horror, he's dead. I feel for a pulse. There's nothing. Mr. Beckenridge! Mr. Beckenridge! Wake up! Wake up! Are you all right? I slap his face. Mr. Beckenridge! Are you all right? But I know my efforts to revive a dead corpse are futile and pointless. I flinch in horror. What the hell, I think. Unable to articulate any thoughts, I'm filled with a discomposing terror. And that's when I hear a loud, guttural growl that reverberates right through my chest. I feel danger before I even see it, and every hair on the back of my neck is standing up on edge. And that is when I see him. He's standing 15 feet away from the truck, a ginormous creature, under the intrusive blazing light of the moon that has not shrouded this creature. I see him in explicit, angry detail. The light is not kind in its divulgence. I have already seen too much. Far, far too much. More than I can bear to actually see. My instincts knows that this is a perilous danger, and she has invited herself to engage with me tonight. and I have no interest in parting with her whatsoever. But it would seem she has other ideas. The creature is an abhorrent being, like something that has been vomited or purged into our world from the dominion of hell itself, or thrust into our reality through Satan worshippers or people indulging in an ignorant curiosity by degenerately playing with Ouija boards. It's the kind of enigmatic creature that should not exist. It embodies evil in its full elucidation. This repellent being is 7 foot tall, covered with thick, manky, tangled hair that is covered in grass, twigs, and thorny briars. His body is built like a man, but highly masculine, with a very narrow waist, ripped torso, where the muscle definition is so pronounced it almost juts out of the skin, like the angry, jagged rocks on the earthen floor of a forest. The creature has long arms, very long, hands and feet that are human-like, but it has claws instead of nails. But his huge head is like that of a wolf. In that moment, I know I'm as good as dead. The creature is actually laughing at my terror, as if feeding off it, as if basking in my fear, like we might relax in a warm bubble bath at home. I tremble, vamoose, and shrink back as he pulls back his muzzle to expose what appears to be 2 rows of sharp, dagger-like canine teeth. His mouth is drooling, and I get the macabre impression that it's me he's salivating over. It's me he wants to eat. I scream shrilly, but no one is here to come to my aid, for the night is devoid of living souls, and my screams are lost in the dark night, blending in seamlessly with the distant howls of coyotes. I am all alone in the car lot, at the mercy of this god-awful creature. I instinctively push Mr. Beckenridge's deceased body onto the ground, where it lands in a floppy heap on the asphalt parking bay. I know it's cruel to leave him there, but he's dead, and I need to get the hell out of this place or I'll be joining him. I plunge my body onto the driver's seat as fast as I can, slamming the door behind me, locking myself into the car, trembling violently. I turn on the ignition, my hands shaking and trembling so much that my movements are clumsy. I finally push my feet down heavily on the gas pedal. The truck almost shrieks as I drive away, with the creature jogging right behind me. I'm so frightened that my struggled breathing is laboured, heavy, burdened, cumbersome. My heart thunders violently in my chest. I think I'm going to have a heart attack. Why won't the bloody creature get the hell away from me? What's he doing following me like this? For a long time I drive around in circles, with the creature following me every step of the way. I hear growls and howls and screams behind me. I can't possibly drive home, lest this insanely evil creature follows me back. I don't want it to know where I live. The creature bolts to the driver's side of the window. He's running right next to me as I drive, laughing in at me, leering at me through his blazing yellow eyes, with the spittle drooling out of his mouth. I'm filled with a vacuous, hollow feeling, as if I'm travelling down a long, long black tunnel, devoid of any light, where everything in that tunnel is snarling, hissing and growling at me. After a while, the creature just disappears. Where has he gone? 1 minute he was there, but now he's nowhere to be seen. I'm so relieved. I drive home as quickly as I can, in my truck that doesn't actually belong to me. I'm so discomposed that even when I arrive in the parking bay of our premises, I am so incapacitated I can barely get out of the truck. It's like my body has frozen up into a lump of hardened cement that isn't going anywhere, so I'm pretty much glued to my seat, like a stationary plastic figure in a toy car. Finally, as I reflect over what has transpired, I realise I have to tell Prissy that her husband is dead, and she is the last person I want to see right now. In hindsight, I should have overlooked her and called the police at once. I don't actually know what I was thinking. I knock on the door. I can hear Prissy's grumbling voice coming to the door. "All right, I'm coming. Why the hell didn't you take your bloody key with you, you complete, total and utter moron?" The door is open, and Prissy is standing in the doorway. She's wearing a burgundy silk pair of pyjamas. She looks as disgruntled as a belligerent white rhino that's in the throes of a frenzied attack. But she's not scaring me. Not after having encountered that monstrous beast. It makes her appear almost like a pussycat. Prissy, on seeing me at the doorway, scowls. "Why, it's the brat from next door! How lovely!" she says sarcastically. "To what do I owe this unexpected honour? At 4:00 in the morning? Are you kidding me? What do you want?" she snaps. "What do you mean by bothering me at this time of the morning?" "It's about your husband. If you've come to tell me he's lying dead in a ditch at the side of the road, see if I care. I don't give a bloody damn. Now leave me alone. I need my beauty sleep. Get out, will you?" I put my foot in the doorway to block her from slamming the door closed. "Ma'am, your husband, he's back at the drive-through where I work. There was a monster. It scratched his face. He's dead." "What kind of nonsense are you spouting, young man? If you think this is some kind of joke, do I look like I'm laughing? Do I look like I'm laughing? Now get bloody lost, will you? What's wrong with you? Are you high on drugs or something?" "Your husband is dead, Prissy. He's dead." Dead? She asks me, scowling, as if trying to ponder whether I'm having a laugh or being deadly serious. I would have to be pretty screwed up if I was joking about something like this. "Yes, dead. Dead, I say. He's lying in the parking lot at the drive-through. He's dead." "Stupid bloody idiot. I told him drink would get the better of him one day. Now out," she says, putting her perfectly manicured hands and long painted talons on my chest and pushing me out of the door. I stood there outside her front door, bemused, disorientated, asking myself, did that really happen? Why did his wife seem so indifferent about her own husband's death? Granted, she had a mouth on her that wanted washing out with soap and water, but surely, even though she and her husband Larry fought continuously like cat and dog, surely she couldn't be so cold, heartless and unmerciful. Little did I know that I ain't seen anything yet, and that this woman's depravity would be as icy cold as a frostbite on your fingers and toes. I decided not to tell the police what I'd seen in the parking lot, but I did say I'd heard something growl and had hightailed it in my neighbour's car back home, as I was so terrified. I was hardly going to tell them what I'd seen. I didn't want to be a laughingstock, and I certainly didn't want them to think I'd lost leave of my senses. The autopsy confirmed that Mr. Beckenridge had died of an actual heart attack, but the scratches on his face were something that baffled the coroner, who confirmed that they had occurred after death. They also said one of his arms had been ripped off his body savagely and was now missing. It was never ever recovered. My bet is that creature I saw ate it for a light snack. Looking back, I'm convinced that poor Mr. Beckenridge had been drinking and decided he wanted to pick up a burger from the fast food joint to satisfy a hunger. He must have encountered the wolf-like beast and been so petrified that the disabling fear had brought on a deadly heart attack. The beast climbed into the car, scratching his face, and later on returned to the parking bay to enjoy the man's arm as a snack. Needless to say, much to my mother's delight, I gave up working the night shift at the drive-through, but I never enlightened her as to why, as some things are just best left unsaid. A couple of weeks or so after Mr. Beckenridge had died, I couldn't find a postcard I was looking for inside the house, which my mother thought she'd accidentally thrown out. I am rumbling around in the outside dustbins, and I discover a plain-looking urn with the printed name Larry Beckenridge on its side. To my shock horror, I discover that the urn is not empty. It still contains Larry's ashes. They had been thrown out and discarded with the trash among the empty spaghetti hoops tins and potato peelings. I mean, who does that? I was appalled and thought that there was a grievous mistake, so I quickly went next door to see Prissy. "It's you again," she says, giving me a scowl when she opens the door. "What the hell do you want now, young man?" Her eyes glance down at the urn I'm carrying in my hands. "What are you doing with that?" she asks in a hostile tone. "It's your husband's ashes," I explain. "They accidentally ended up in the dumpster by mistake. I thought you'd want them back." "Well, you thought wrong, didn't you?" she said, pushing me out of the door. "Get out and put that bloody urn back in the dumpster, will you? I don't want my trash regurgitated, thank you very much." And she slams the door violently behind me. Me and my brother Antonio could not believe Prissy's heartlessness, that she could be so cold, calculating and callous. So we decided to take Larry's ashes into the woodgrove and to throw them into the pretty creek there. We said some prayers, tossed his ashes and flowers we'd bought over the water. We watched them float away with a plethora of rose petals. It was very pretty. I hope you find some peace now, Larry, I say. All of a sudden, a familiar chill runs down my body, a dreadful sense of foreboding. I sense we're being watched, and then I smell the same garbage smell that I smelt at the car lot that bodeful, inauspicious night. So me and my brother hightail it as fast as we can out of there, and I began to wonder if that creature had indeed followed me home that ill-fated night. I still don't know the answer to the question, but suffice to say, I've never dared ventured into that woodgrove again. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.